This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Hello, college football fans, and welcome to the Primetime Podcast. My name is Ricky Widmer, and as always, I'm joined by young Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And Brandon, we got a jam-packed, I say it every week, but we got a jam-packed show today. Going to be talking about some Ohio State Buckeyes. We've got playoff committee, the first playoff rankings. After you listen to this podcast, make sure to go to the YouTube page for Most Valuable Podcasts. Check out our first initial playoff rankings before we get the ones tonight. And then we're going to be talking some Duke Miami and the fiasco, the kind of rumble down there in North Carolina that ended on a big bang play to end the game, or so the refs thought. But Brandon, the big headlining news that came into Saturday: J.T. Barrett suspended 1 game, DUI. The Buckeyes are going back to Cardell Jones, and the first thing I think of is, I know we mentioned it in our college playoff rankings, the question, but I don't think Ohio State this is not the year for Ohio State. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Boom. Bomb to drop the podcast. Not the year for Ohio State. They're not repeating.
Well, the first thing that I think of when I saw the thing about J.T. Barrett Saturday morning, breaking news on College Game Day, I was disappointed. I was really disappointed because, he was, it was Cardell Jones, the guy at the beginning of the season, handed the keys of the kingdom. And he wasn't getting the job done. It was sloppy. They won, but it wasn't what they wanted. They give it off to J.T. Barrett, and he was doing it. I mean, he had a great game. Everything was going really well. It looked good. And then you hear about this off-field incident. And, the leaders, in my opinion, the leaders need to be leaders all the time. And a true leader always is. And, I shouldn't say always. I take that back. It's not always. No one's perfect. But you got to be smart. You've got to be smart. His play on the field is too good for him to, risk something like that off the field. You have got to be smart for your own safety, the safety of others. You've got to be holding yourself to a standard, a high standard off the field. On the field, huge. Off the field, possibly bigger. I'm surprised that Jameis Winston wasn't more affected by his off-field situations. We all know about those. But I think that with J.T. Barrett, you're too talented. You're too talented to not use your head and do something stupid off the field. Real disappointed by this one, Ricky. I really am.
Well, and I mean, I didn't even think about that. You just bring it up, Jameis Winston. And it kind of brings me back to I know this is a little off of my statement to start the podcast, but just for a second, look at this situation early on: Urban Meyer, Ohio State, and Jameis Winston. When everything off the field happened with Jameis Winston, you can say, yeah, well, you know what, Ricky? He was suspended a game, I believe, when he stole those crab legs, and he was suspended a half here. But for the big overlaying off the field issue that Jameis Winston had, nothing came from it. Ohio State, right away, J.T. Barrett, boom, he gets arrested for driving while intoxicated. What's the first thing Ohio State does? You're suspended a game. And that's how it should be. And the thing that I feel like, of course, when you say, you're not the only one, Brandon, to say, oh, well, this is a disappointment. He should be disappointed in himself, because it's exactly what you said. When you get into a vehicle intoxicated, you are not just putting yourself at risk. You're putting others at risk. It's kind of like the one thing, a little insight to me, is when I was learning to drive, I learned from my grandfather, and before I even put the keys in the ignition, I sat behind the wheel, and he looked me right in the eyes and said, Ricky, I want you to know this, and I want you to think about this every time you get into a car. When you go to drive, you're not just driving a car. You are holding a weapon in your hand each and every time. And that's the first thing I thought about is he was holding this weapon, intoxicated. And, I mean, of course we can look behind the scenes, but really the thing that you guys are listening to this podcast about is how does this affect Ohio State on the football field? And I remember earlier in the year, Virginia Tech, that game, everyone was saying, well, you know what? Ohio State's going to be fine when Cardale Jones leaves this year because Barrett's the leader. He's got his head on his shoulders. He's going to be a great quarterback for them in the future. Now he's a starter. This happens. I don't think this hurts Ohio State immediately. Like week 1, I don't think it hurts them this week against Minnesota. However, you've got 2 weeks to get whatever this is under control, Brandon, because you've got at home against Minnesota, then on the road against Illinois on ABC. So, I mean, there's a chance where it's like, okay, that's another easy win. Then you've got, boom, home against Michigan State, the 1A championship for your side of the conference. Then you go to Ann Arbor, which could be 1B championship for your side of the conference. So, really, to me, you got 2 weeks to get this under control. I am saying it now more than ever. I've said it last week. I've said it in past podcasts. Ohio State loses to either Michigan or Michigan State. They're going to lose to one of them and not make the playoffs.
You know, I think that's the thing. Now you've got distractions. Mm-hmm. You've got a distraction. And that's what, you know, any team wants to avoid is a big distraction. That's what Ohio State's got now. And now it's back to Cardale Jones, who, honestly, if he doesn't pick up his game a little bit and J.T. Barrett is possibly suspended for any more length of time, which I don't think he will be, but then if Jones plays well against Minnesota, does he keep it? Or does it go back to Barrett? Then you've got yourself a quarterback controversy. You don't want that going into Michigan State. You don't want that going into Michigan. You have got to be decisive in your thinking. You've got to know exactly what you want to do. You have to be set at that quarterback position. It's simple as that. I think that Ohio State, unfortunately, I think J.T. Barrett has made it now difficult for his coach, Urban Meyer.
Well, and I'm looking at a graphic right now, and this is on the Ohio State Buckeye page for ESPN graphic from SportsCenter that says the kind of the comparisons for this season. Touchdown interceptions. You got J.T. Barrett, 7 touchdowns with 2 INTs. Cardale Jones, 7-5. Rushing touchdowns. Cardale has 1. J.T. Barrett with 7. Yards per rush, 7.8 with J.T., 2.5 for Cardale. And the total QBR is in favor of J.T., 80 to 48 of Cardale Jones. This is what I think. If I'm Ohio State, J.T. Barrett, not officially, so like not the okay, we're going to suspend you for the rest of the season, but if I'm Urban Meyer, I'm saying, okay, you're suspended this week against Minnesota, but virtually your season is over. You are not going to play another game this season. And the reason being is I would be right away and say, hey, we got to look at this as an issue. You have to get your head on your shoulders. Do you want to be the leader of this team or not? That's what I think. And J.T. Barrett has to, after this, reprove to his team that he wants to be the leader of this team. I'd be like, for indefinitely, you're on the bench. You have to prove your worth again to this team. If, let's say, Cardale struggles against Minnesota, we're not feeling it against Illinois, you know who I think is going to get thrown in there and could start November 21st against Michigan State? Braxton Miller. Why not?
Well, why not? Because then that takes away one of your wide receiver options. I mean, I think that's why not.
I see, and here's the thing, and I know you're saying, well, that takes away one of your wide receiver options, but what Braxton Miller, the reason why we moved him, and when I say we, Ohio State, moved him to wide receiver, was because the quarterback position was so just in depth for Ohio State to where you didn't need him. Braxton Miller, when playing quarterback, is a guy that can do it with his arm, with his legs. I feel like even if they moved Miller back to quarterback, he could do a great job for them, better than Cardale Jones. Because I think because of this, you cannot go back to JT. You can't. You have to make JT prove himself. Because if you go back to JT, you're basically saying, oh, it's just a slap on a wrist, you're done for one game. Here's the keys to the kingdom again. You have to, if you want to be the Ohio State Buckeyes, #1 team in the nation, if you want to have that pride of we are the Ohio State Buckeyes, you can't just be letting anyone have the keys to the kingdom. He has to re-earn it. So for me, it's either do you go with Cardale Jones, but if Cardale struggles, do you go with Braxton Miller? I say there's a good chance Miller is playing quarterback November 21st.
I don't think so. I don't think that Ohio State can afford to take away a receiving option. I don't think they can afford to take away that receiving option. They take away Miller, who else do they have? I mean, where's the depth there?
See, but here's the thing.
Where's the depth? Where's the depth?
Braxton Miller's not even your leading receiver.
He's not, but you take him away, where's your depth?
I still feel like if Braxton Miller only has 19 catches this year, only 19, and I look at that and I go, okay, you're not. The last time I even heard of Braxton Miller doing anything spectacular was that Virginia Tech game. I mean, Rutgers, he had 2 catches, no touchdowns. Yeah, he had a touchdown against Penn State, touchdown against Maryland, so he proved his worth then. Before those 2 games, the last time he even got to the end zone was the Virginia Tech game. Against Indiana, he only had 1 catch. Northern Illinois, he didn't have a catch at all. So,
Michael Thomas is clearly their top receiver, 35 catches, 536 yards, 6 touchdowns. But I think that when you have Braxton Miller as just that speedster option, I think that you can be more of a decoy than anything, but still at the same time make the big plays, be a threat, and actually do something. They would lose that, and they would definitely cover up Thomas.
It all depends on how Cardale Jones plays. If Cardale,
do you think he learned anything in the time that he was benched? Do you think he learned anything?
If I'm a Buckeye fan, I hope he did, because I mean, I do get what you're saying, Brandon. I do kind of agree that Miller is that speedster option, but at the end, I look at it, and if I have an offense, what position is more important to me, quarterback or wide receiver? If you're not saying quarterback right now, you don't know what football is. You've never watched a lick of football in your life. Because if you don't have the quarterback to get things done, you're not going to win. Especially with the teams that we have in this league. One of the big things we're talking about, Baylor. We talked about Baylor last week. Possibly, hey, are they going to fall off because they had their quarterback who was injured? TCU, why are they doing so well? Trevon Boykin. Alabama coming into the year. I mean, right now with them and LSU, it's kind of like they're the exception to the rule because they have the running back with Henry and Fournette for LSU. But with Alabama, the big thing was, what are we going to see from Coker? The quarterback position is what we focus on. Notre Dame, their quarterback gets injured. Immediately we look to Deshaun Kaiser. You need a quarterback to win in this league, especially when we get to the playoff. If Cardale Jones doesn't play like he did last year, Ohio State doesn't beat Marcus Mariota. Why did Oregon do so well? You could say the system, but no. Marcus Mariota is why they did so well. Yeah, they had weapons on the outside, but they had the quarterback. Why did Florida State do so well under Jameis Winston? They had the quarterback. If Cardale Jones comes out and he plays like Cardale Jones of last year that won the championship, or the Cardale Jones that we thought we were going to see this season, then yes, keep Braxton Miller at wide receiver. But and this is only because J.T. Barrett, to me, because in my mind I'm saying he's done for the season because of this DUI. If Cardale Jones struggles, Broxton Miller comes in at quarterback because that's your option. Who's going to play quarterback if you take J.T. Barrett out of it? Unless you're one of those people that are saying, you know what, J.T. Barrett, he's now the second stringer. If Cardale struggles, J.T. still gets in. I say if you do that, J.T. doesn't learn anything. You have to have him sit for a certain amount of time. For me, it's this season. Let him reprove to this team that he's a leader, that he's not going to make stupid mistakes like he did.
So, Ohio State captain Taylor Decker said that J.T. Barrett addressed the team and had previously called veteran players to apologize Sunday for his arrest. And Decker then said that he would have no problem forgiving him because Barrett is a high-character guy and, quote, everybody makes mistakes, unquote.
Do you think I'm too harsh saying that you shut him down for the year and make him reprove his, not worth, but his leadership to this team? And say, there's a chance that may change, but for right now, you're not suspended, but you're shut down for the year.
I don't know. I mean, he's been suspended for a game. They are taking away some financial aid for summer classes.
Mm-hmm.
They're showing that this is it's a serious situation. That's what Ohio State is showing. I think though that it may be too harsh to say suspend him for the rest of the year.
I'm not saying suspend him. I'm saying you're suspended this 1 week against Minnesota. Then you come back, you're not suspended. But until further notice, you're shut down and you're a bench player until you either reprove that you can be a leader.
Bench player won't come off the bench, or
like
would
you're not gonna see action unless we really need to.
Okay, so basically benched for the rest of the year.
Yeah, you're benched for the rest of the year.
So, I think that might be a little harsh. Because I don't know if you can necessarily afford that right now. If you're Ohio State, you need your best players in the game. But the punishment of being suspended a game, I think that if he owns up to it, it sounds like he has. He's apologized to his players. That's who he needs to apologize to. He needs to apologize to his players, to the coaches, to everything. If you would go up and apologize to coach first, coach say, "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to your teammates." And I think that ownership, being a leader, you take ownership of things that you've done wrong and you learn from it. And if he's doing that, which it looks like he is, you have this suspension, you take it in stride, you come back, you put it out of sight, out of mind, and you're back to football. You're back to football as a better person, hopefully. And I think that that's something that Barrett can do. I think that he deserves that opportunity because people do make mistakes. But I think that now from football, in this next couple of weeks, they're going to be leaning on Ezekiel Elliott. I think that he's going to be more of the guy, the go-to guy, and having Cardale Jones as more of a game manager.
Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at their schedule and their future schedule, and I know I already made the big move of saying, well, Ohio State's they're either going to lose to Michigan State or Michigan, and I'm going to stand by that. They're going to lose one of those games. I'm leaning more towards them losing to Jim Harbaugh and Michigan rather than Michigan State. But, part of me, if Illinois played better this past week against Penn State and didn't get shut out 39-0 and let Christian Hackenberg look like the Christian Hackenberg that we thought we were going to see most of this year, part of me would say a small 5 to 3% part of me would say there's a chance Ohio State loses at Illinois. But with how Illinois played this past week, I don't want to say that. I think just by even bringing that up, a lot of you listening are like, immediately Ricky doesn't know what he's talking about. Maybe it's the Illini bias coming out, but
it is.
Here's what I think. And with that game, because of course, Michigan State and Michigan, anybody could throw out, oh, well, they could lose this one. Here's my case for how Ohio State, that could be, I'll throw this out, could be a trap game for Ohio State. The past 3 weeks for Illinois, this entire year, defense has played a lot better. The team has played a lot better under Bill Cubit. 29-20 loss against Iowa. Defense played really well. They could have won that game. They play Wisconsin. Close game. Kept that game really close with Wisconsin. I know Wisconsin hasn't been what we thought they'd be. Close game. Then the defense doesn't look that good. Offense gets shut out at Penn State. There's a chance, with that being technically the last home game, the last time that the Illinois seniors are going to be playing at Memorial Stadium in Champaign. Reason being is the last home game of the year against Northwestern's at Soldier Field this year. There's a chance that team comes out fired up, and the Illinois game could be a trap game for Ohio State. However, I'm not gonna say anything that's too ludicrous. I don't see Ohio State losing that game, but I'm saying could be a trap game, especially because of what we've seen from Cardale Jones. If Northern Illinois could almost beat Ohio State, and if Indiana could almost beat Ohio State, why not Illinois in Champaign? Why not? And I mean, that was a game, the Northern Illinois game was a game where J.T. Barrett played most of the snaps, 11 of 19, 97 yards, a touchdown INT. That was the game where Cardale was benched, went 4 of 9 with 2 INTs in that game. And then the win over Indiana was all Cardale Jones. 1 touchdown, 1 INT, 18 of 27, 247 yards. And I'm looking, the big factor in both of those games, Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, with the Northern one, it came down to that last defensive touchdown, but Elliott, 108 yards against Northern. Against Indiana, he was the biggest of factors, 274 yards, 3 touchdowns. So to me, Ohio State, if you want to make the playoffs, which I don't think you will, but if you want to make the playoffs, Brandon, they have to do what you said, lean on Ezekiel. Look at LSU and Alabama. Look at the success that they've been able to have. More LSU than Alabama because people could throw out with Alabama that they lost the game. But look at LSU. They've been able to be so successful because they have arguably the best running back in the league. Look at how Cardale Jones was not the only one that played well last year in the Buckeyes playoff run. Ezekiel Elliott had a big play against the Crimson Tide last year. They got to lean on him now in the biggest of ways. Say, you know what? If our quarterback struggles, you're the guy we're going to. We need you to step up if we want to win.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that Cardale Jones, he needs to have that in the back of his mind. You know, at this point, he knows. I mean, I was going to say he knows.
This is his time. This is his time to become a quarterback in the NFL.
But listen here, I was going to say he knows that a lot of people don't have faith in that team, but he could be like how a lot of athletes are, I don't watch ESPN. I don't know what they say.
Do.
They do.
They do.
They do.
If you're tweeting Ronda Rousey for dates, you watch ESPN. There's no doubt about it.
So I think that at the end of the day, he knows what this means. A lot of people don't have faith in that team. People do not believe that they will succeed. I think that's got to be there. And he wants to be the guy. He wants to be the guy. So I see a rejuvenated Cardale Jones. I really do. I think that he'll come out. He'll play much better. He'll play loose. He'll play loose. And that's what he's got to do. And you're playing against a Minnesota team that has been competitive at times this year, especially in week 1 against TCU. They gave them a run, lost by 7. This is a game that Ohio State could win easily. This is also a game that could be a dogfight for Ohio State if they do not come to play.
And I mean, the one thing, and this is the last thing I want to say about the Minnesota thing before I ask you our final question. The one thing that's even to me, not scary, but it's worrisome if you're an opponent of them. Last week they played tough against Michigan. They lose on Michigan stopping them at the goal line. The Golden Gophers are now a tricky team for the rest of the season. The reason being is their head coach retired. So how much of them saying, hey, you know what? We gotta prove to this guy that we're still behind him even though he's not with us. Because Jerry Kill is respected. I want to say respected amongst all his peers, all his players. They came out and you could see that they were kind of playing for him.
I mean, they came out with the flag, waving it around in his honor. I mean, yes, these guys are playing for him. I mean, that's absolutely true.
And that's why this is going to be a dangerous game team for Ohio State and why they could be dangerous. But before we move on to the next thing we're going to talk about in this podcast, just to kind of put the final kit and caboodle on the Ohio State talk, Brandon, I'll let you answer this statement after me. Final statement on Ohio State. They do not make the playoff. They beat Minnesota. They beat Illinois. They beat a close game against Michigan State. They get shut out in Ann Arbor and miss the playoffs.
So you're saying that they're going to win the next 3 and that they're not
shut
going
out
to...
in Ann Arbor.
Wow.
The Michigan Wolverines with Jim Harbaugh shut them out. Ohio State doesn't make the Big Ten title game. I'm going to say Michigan gets in because of that win. Ohio State doesn't make the playoffs. That's what I think.
I think it depends. We're going to see... So we see Cardale Jones this weekend.
While you're thinking,
and no, in my mind, this is what I'm thinking.
Okay, is
it goes 2 ways for me. Is that Ohio State comes out and Cardale Jones is this, reinvented version of himself of last year, lights him up, and Ohio State wins big. But on the opposite side, the flip side of the coin, Minnesota could win in a real close one. And after what I saw last week out of Minnesota and how well, they played really well against Michigan. The entire game, they were there. The entire game, they were hanging on. In the end, they weren't able to come out with the victory, but Minnesota has been that up and down team this year. Not ranked, not anywhere going towards a college football playoff team. They're not going to be that. But you know what they're going to be? They're going to play a real good spoiler. And I know what I'm going with. Minnesota pulls the upset this weekend. Minnesota pulls the upset this weekend over Ohio State. And people are going, Brandon, that's absolutely nowhere going to happen. And I don't know if I believe it myself, but I said it, so I got to stick with it. And I'm going to say Minnesota beats Ohio State, knocks them out of playoff talk. We can all just move on from it. We know what we were going to do it at one point, but I think that they do that this weekend. It's a close game, but Minnesota is going to pull the upset, and that's just what I'm saying. I don't know. Again, I don't know if I necessarily believe it, but that's what I'm saying.
Can I match? I know I already gave my real prediction.
You can't. You can't because you already gave yours.
Can I match a bold prediction with another bold prediction?
I suppose.
If yours doesn't happen, you know what would be even crazier? Illinois at Memorial Stadium beats Ohio State 28-21, just like they did in, I want to say it was 2007, when Juice Williams and the Illini went into the horseshoe and beat the top-ranked Buckeyes.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, you were saying the Gophers are going to be a scary team because obviously they're playing for their coach now, the retired coach, Jerry Kill. Like I said, Illinois, that's basically senior day for Illinois. Because like I said, they get one more home game, but it's Northwestern at Soldier Field. So that Ohio State game's the last time those Illinois seniors are going to be playing at Memorial Stadium in front of their home crowd. Could bring a little bit extra charge. The Illinois defense has been better this year. But if I was putting my money on anything, I'm putting Ohio State winning their next 3, losing at Michigan. That's just how it's going to go. And the next thing...
Well, I was just going to say, how crazy would this be? They lose at Minnesota and win their next 3.
I'd love it.
How crazy would that be?
Well,
lose at Minnesota, win their next 3.
Here's the only Here's the only thing I hate about that. Because depending on, and this is going to go...
And I say at Minnesota, against Minnesota. But
this could go into what we're talking about next as we get ready for... As you are hearing this today, we're going to get our first college playoff rankings from the committee. This kind of goes into that conversation, but the thing I hate about that is they could lose to Minnesota, win the next 3, because they beat Michigan State and Michigan. They'd win their side of the conference, and they would go on to play in the Big Ten title game, could win that game, and virtually get themselves back into the title talk, depending on how far they've gone. Because here's the thing, and this is what I'm going to bring up, and this goes into what we think. Me and Brandon are kind of going to put our minds in the bodies of the selection committee for our first rankings. It says here in ESPN, and in ESPN article I'm looking at, how will the CFB committee approach its first rankings? Here's the tiebreakers that they're going to be thinking of when they get to a crossroad. Number 1, championships won. Obviously, we won't know that till the end of the season. So that means if Ohio State and Michigan State are close, well, Ohio State won the Big Ten. They win the tiebreaker. The second tiebreaker is strength of schedule. The third one, head-to-head competition if it occurred. And the third one, comparative outcomes of common opponents. However, in parentheses, it says without incentivizing margin of victory. So basically, margin of victory doesn't give a shit. They're just going on comparative outcomes of common opponents. To me, I feel like the first rankings of this college football playoff, we already know the top 4. We already know what the top 4 is going to be. In no particular order, it's going to be the Buckeyes, the Bears, the Tigers, and the Tigers of LSU and Clemson. So it's going to be OSU, Baylor, Clemson, LSU. Those are the top 4. However, where do they put those top 4? I don't know, except for the top 2, Ohio State and Baylor. That's what I'm thinking going into this. There's got to be no other teams that the committee puts in the top 4 right now, right? There's no other teams that we can think of? Am I just kind of crowning people before we should crown them?
No, there's no one at this point who you could put in there.
I know TCU fans are probably screaming at their computer if they have not thrown their laptop or tablet at the wall already.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anyone else that you can put in there right now. I think we have to wait at least another weekend, and this is the weekend that I'm excited for and I'm waiting for, and I know which game I am looking at, and I know what team I'm thinking of.
Well, you're going to say LSU, Alabama, but let's think right now. I'm throwing this out, Brandon. You are one of the people on the playoff committee.
Yeah.
What's going through your head when you're trying to construct this first playoff ranking of the year? What's going through your head?
Well, Ricky, you know the body of work of each team.
The air quotes are the body of work, man.
Yeah, no.
What have they done?
No, I'm looking at the strength of their schedule. I'm looking at I think how they how they stacked up against some other teams. Okay, so let's say Alabama lost to Ole Miss, but Memphis beat Ole Miss by 13. You look at something like that in that sense.
See, but how you said by 13, that's interesting because when you go to the tiebreakers, it says without incentivizing margin of victory. That just brings up the point of, do you think we should look at, let's say, for example, LSU and Alabama? If they played, I'm going to put out a situation where both teams played Ole Miss where they would this season, and both teams, let's say, either beat or lost to this team, should it matter that, this team beat them by more points, so they should be ranked ahead of them? Should it matter? Should we put margin of victory and weigh that with a little bit more weight, how we used to in the BCS?
Well, I wouldn't say that, because Memphis beat Ole Miss by 13 and Alabama lost to Ole Miss, that I'm jumping Memphis in front of Alabama.
I'm talking more of like if we had LSU compared to Alabama. That's what I'm saying.
You have to look at the game. I think that you would have to look at the game individually, and I think that that's probably why they don't do it. Because they have to go, well, Ole Miss's defense didn't play so well in this one. Well, they had this guy on this game, but they didn't have, it gets too tricky. It gets too tricky, I think, in that sense. But those are some of the things that I'm looking at. What are you looking at, Ricky?
Well, here's what and this kind of goes into when I was doing my side of our rankings. I'm just going to put a little snapshot for you. For the 3 and 4 spot of the college football playoff, I had virtually 4 teams that I could basically put there. Because let's be honest, Ohio State's number 1, Baylor's number 2 for right now. They are clearly the top 2 teams in everybody's rankings. However, there were 4 teams, Clemson, LSU, TCU, Michigan State, that I was looking for. And I basically went down and I looked at LSU's schedule. And I said, okay, all these teams are undefeated. Who did LSU beat? We have a 25 Mississippi State team. However, it was only a 2-point win. Then they have a nice win against, at the time, 18 Auburn. But how does Auburn look? However, they beat 18 Auburn. Then they go ahead and decisively beat a number 8 Florida team. So to me, I'm looking at that, okay, 3 good ranked teams, 3 wins with that Mississippi State being a question mark. TCU, no ranked wins. No ranked wins, and you should have lost against Texas Tech and maybe even Iowa State, maybe even Minnesota. So to me, TCU's below LSU. Then you have Michigan State. Yeah, you beat Michigan, number 12, but you probably should have lost. And then you beat Oregon. Close game, but you beat Oregon. I'm putting Michigan State ahead of TCU. So right in between LSU and TCU. Then with Clemson, you beat number 6 Notre Dame, and you kind of survive the rest. I know it's only 1 ranked team, but, I mean, with me, it put into that, with just beating that 1 ranked team, you go ahead of TCU. I even put Clemson ahead of Michigan State because of that Michigan game. I know it's a win. I know that a lot of people are going to be saying, but Ricky, they won the game. But me, I look at that game. At the game, like you said, where you have to look at the game. You should have lost that game. You got lucky. So that's why, to me, I had my 3 through, this would be 3, 4, 5, 6 as LSU, Clemson, Michigan State, TCU. That's how I came up with 3 through 6.
No, and I see why you do that. I don't know if the committee would be looking at individual games.
No, I know.
Because on a game, and I think that's probably why they don't do it, Ricky, is because it'd be a lot more work than just saying, here's the body of work, here's how they've played, here's their schedule, here's all this stuff, instead of going, well, in this game, you know what I mean? I think that, yeah, if there was the time to do that, absolutely, because I think that getting down to that would be more intriguing. But I think that they have a better system than going to each individual game.
And the last thing we're going to talk about today, because you guys don't know this, but me and Brandon have been in the studio for 3 hours recording videos and a podcast today. So we're going to move on to our last subject of the podcast, and Duke Miami. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is when I first saw the clip, I didn't think anything of it. And when I say anything of it, I mean, I didn't think that, oh, well, you know, that shouldn't have happened. I watched it and went, holy shit, Miami won that game. However, things have come out. Maybe a guy should have been down. Some refs have been suspended for 2 weeks. What are your thoughts on the whole Miami-Duke ending?
Well, you know, I've watched it a couple of times already. I'm currently watching it again right now.
I was just going to do the same thing.
And I am looking to see where this guy's knee was apparently down. Still looking. I see where it was. It looked like it was at the 25-yard line where the guy's knee may have been down for Miami. And, you know, I think that there were some other things where they're like, you know, possible block in the back. And there was a flag, but then they picked it up, waved it off, said no block in the back. You know, at the end of the day, that happens. I mean, you look at the NFL officiating, which I think has gone way downhill lately. They don't know what they're doing anymore. But in this one, stuff like that happens. Like, you're going to miss if the knee was down. You know, you're going to miss it. You want to try and do everything you possibly can to get it right. But I don't know. This is probably just me. I don't really see anything wrong with it.
And while you were talking, Brandon, I just watched it. And now the second time actually looking for it, you see it. But here's the thing that kind of sparks the conversation for this one. How does, I mean, Duke, if the guy was down, Duke should have won the game. But how does a replay official miss that? Where your one job was to watch that and say, oh, his knee's down, overturn it. And that didn't happen. On the other side, though, I looked at it and just watching it for what it was without analyzing it like I just did, the first thing that came to my mind, Music City Miracle. When we had the Tennessee Titans throw the across the field lateral against the Bills in the playoffs, and it goes all the way down the sideline to the touchdown for the Titans. I don't know. Like, this was a thing where I'm like, this is not what football needed right now. Because we just did a podcast on the Onside Kick where we talked about exactly what you mentioned. The problems in the NFL with officiating. Now college has this. Should he have been called down? Yes. Should it have been overturned? Yes. But here's how I stand on it right now. It was not called like that. It was not overturned. Duke Blue Devil fans, I'm sorry you lost. I'm sorry you lost. That's just how it goes. That's how it goes. You lost. And the reason why I say that is we cannot come back now and say, okay, we're going to make that a W, because then teams from 5 years ago can say, well, hey, you know what? This should have been called. We got to change ours to a W. There'll be too many teams doing that. You just got to handle it. I mean, it would be different if Duke was undefeated and was a playoff team. With a one loss, does anyone see Duke being a playoff team? No. And I know there's going to be people mad at me for saying this, but maybe this is what Miami needed after firing Al Golden. After everything we talked about last week, maybe Miami needed this. Maybe didn't have to come out with T-shirts with the laterals on it, but they did.
Well, here's what I think is that, you know, it probably shouldn't have even come down to that play. You know, I understand that it did, but it probably shouldn't have even come down to that. I think, though, that really what you want to do is you want to try and get these calls correct. Mm-hmm. You want to get it right. As much as fans love these big plays, they live for. That's what fans live for. You know, that's what fans live for. That's what sports announcers live for. They love it. But you want to get the calls right. You want to uphold the integrity of the game in that sense. And I think that...
Okay, Roger Goodell.
No, but I'm actually meaning it. I think that's extremely important. And on that one, I have it freeze framed on the shot where he's down. His knee's down.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, his knee is down.
Ball's right there in his hand. His knee is down. That should have been the end of the game. It continued to go on, and that is extremely unfortunate for Duke. I think it's extremely unfortunate that, even more so unfortunate that the officials did not get the call right. I think, though, that at the end of the day, you can't take this back for Miami. You cannot take it back at all. And I think I started off saying that, people may be upset, but I'm okay with it. I don't know if I'm necessarily okay with it, but that's how it played out.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it stands. And what I mean, I think, is that I'm okay with it standing. It has to. But going forward, the right call has to be made in that situation.
Well, and I just feel like with the refs should be suspended because you didn't do your job. The call should have been overturned, but however, as Brandon said, it is what it is. It stands. And this is actually where we're going to end the podcast. I'm turning it on to you. What do you guys think about the Miami-Duke ending? Also, anything we talked about today in today's podcast. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this one. Go make sure you hit up our first college football playoff rankings of the year. It sure is a doozy. I'll give you a hint. There's some shockers there in the top 4. You can go ahead, hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Ricky Widmer. Brandon is at Young_Swan19. Let us know what you think. Duke, Miami, Ohio State. I'd love to have some Twitter conversations with you guys. Most Valuable Podcast is at Most Valuable Pod.
The picks?
Oh, we got to do that. What's your secret pick for me? You always remind me of this, Brandon. What you got for me?
Well, I know I always remind you of it, and, that's why you still have me around here, buddy. But, let's see here. Let us see here what I got for you, what I got cooking for you this week.
I'll hit you with mine first.
Go ahead.
Cincinnati, Houston.
Houston.
Okay. That was very easy.
It was.
8-0 Houston, 5-3 Cincinnati.
It was indeed.
What you got for me, big guy?
Still looking at the schedule.
Brandon, you remind me that we need secret picks, and you don't got one for me?
Oh, no. I got one for you.
Okay. You're trying to decide between two? You're doing the whole decider going on in your head?
How about this one?
Okay, hit me. I'm waiting.
Notre Dame, Pitt.
Notre Dame. I almost gave you that one myself, but I thought in my head, well, it's way too easy that it's Notre Dame. However, there's a chance Notre Dame could get upset because they should have lost to Temple last week. But, yeah, I'll go with Notre Dame. I'll go with the safe pick in the secret pick. But that is going to do it for the Primetime Podcast. Thank you guys for checking out our podcast today. And as always, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this MVP podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Most Valuable Pod for more great podcasts.